I mean, the one thing that struck me was, so England lost the tournament, the final, but in the process, the politics that the team stood for or is standing for won or is winning. I mean, it hasn't won yet, but what I'm saying, what you just described is kind of suddenly Rashford released a statement, I think, where he talked about, I'm not apologizing for who I am, that I'm a black man in Britain, and that I'm from a particular place. You have Tyrone Mings going after Priti Patel, and now this, as you said, that what they represent is now almost not controversial anymore, because and I would like for you to say something about that. For example, in the lead up to the tournament, there were black players were in the same squad. Like, for example, I mean, I would love for you to talk about this, like Raheem Sterling and the kind of abuse that he received, right? And he was the player that got them to the final. So it's fascinating, like how he gets them to the final. He wasn't that great in the final. 3 black players are the ones who kind of missed the crucial penalties. And normally, and this was, I remember on Twitter, people were saying, okay, now we're going to get all this abuse from the English fans, which did happen. There was the kind of tepid response by the English FA. And I think people thought, it's going to be, again, this is what it's going to be like. But it seems that there's something else happened. We're now in this kind of moment where it looks like Black Lives Matter is now it's normal politics now.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the really incredible thing. I mean, this had been building and building. I mean, just before England got through to the sort of the group stages, a really interesting debate was starting to emerge about what this team represents and how they might represent the different England or the real England. This was epitomised in an article by the former Liverpool player Jamie Carragher. Ironically, he writes in the Daily Telegraph, which is you couldn't find a more pro-Conservative Party newspaper in Britain. In fact, we call it the Daily Tory Graph, Tory being the old nickname for the Conservative Party. But in that paper that was then, if you like, summarised by other mass-selling papers like the Daily Mirror, Carragher made some really, really interesting points. He talked about how, this team have taken on issues which, previous players and other England squads never had. Sterling had took on the racists, as Sean mentioned. Rashford had talked about and made the government to turn a U-turn on free school meals for kids like him. Jordan Henderson, the Liverpool captain, had campaigned on behalf of the NHS and got players to donate money, and many of the England players were donating their earnings from the Euros to the NHS as well. And what Carragher said was really interesting. He said that Southgate and his players have kind of come up with or constructed a new idea of what it might be to be the England team or what Englishness is. And what Carragher pointed out to was he then criticised the politicians, Boris Johnson and Priti Patel and the like, who criticised the players for bringing social issues and anti-racism to the fore, if you like. And he said now they're jumping on the bandwagon and trying to support them. And he attacked them for that and said they're hypocrites. So there was an attack on the politicians for being hypocrites prior to the final. There's now further attacks on them for them trying to show their anti-racist credentials when clearly they're not. And I think that's kind of unprecedented for sports players of such prominence. I mean, Rashford and Sterling have got millions of followers on Facebook. I bet they've got more than the whole of the Conservative government put together. So they're putting this stuff out there and, they're really embedding themselves in popular culture and putting across an anti-racist message. And that's just absolutely fantastic. And it's brilliant for anti-racism and the anti-racist movement. What we've got to do now is turn that into more campaign and more activism. And in fact, we've got to turn it into further action. Now, just to give you another sense of how deep this is going, Sky Sports News, which is in part owned by Robert Murdoch and dominates, obviously, football in the UK, on their main programmes last night, they were criticising the FA and the government for just putting out statements and saying they need to turn these statements into action. Now, the fact that Sky Sports News are saying that, again, is down to Black Lives Matters. The fact that this whole debate is taking place at the level it is in such a a wide forum of social media, the mainstream media, TV, and the print media, is all down to Black Lives Matter. And I think it's really, really important we don't lose that focus, because, you know, that's really the turning point was those protests last year. There's always been anti-racist movements. There's been, you know, some speaking out by Sterling and others. But the fact that the whole of the media are talking about it, and I've got the front page of the Sun here, you know, the most racist, one of the most disgusting newspapers.
Hold on. You actually bought the paper. You bought the Sun.
I only got a copy of it today just for this program to show you, because look, it's incredible.
I know you don't. I know you don't buy the Sun. I know you don't buy the Sun.
Of course I don't buy the Sun. But look at this.
Yeah, that's you. I would never expect to see that.
Wow.
Nobody did. And that's really incredible. The fact that the Sun are now having to put 3 black players saying we defend you against racism on the front page is incredible. And that's a victory to Black Lives Matter and the anti-racist movement. Of course, many of us don't trust them and they're a false friend. This is a paper that's been constantly xenophobic, racist, anti-immigrant as well. So, you know, we won't be relying on them.
By the way, you should also add, and shameless when it came to Hillsborough. The Hillsborough tragedy.
Course, yeah.
So this is not a paper with good moral. Well, if you want with ethics, it's not a paper with ethics.
And sorry, while we're on Hillsborough, because this kind of takes me to the question I wanted to ask, where as far as race in sport is concerned, it seems like we're turning a corner insofar as it's now, as you say, mainstream in order to call out racism, in order to call out the transformation of the game, the diversification of the faces representing the highest orders and codes and so on. But it's almost kind of thinking about this in relation to, for example, the nature of the game itself, football as a sport, and how that is still dominated by moneyed interests, how the trend it's walking on seems to still be the commercialization in favor of football capital and whatever. I mean, this is happening the same year of the Super League proposal, which thank goodness fell apart, but that only gives us temporary respite. And we still think that football is going to continue to head on in this other direction. So when it comes to football itself, at the end of a tournament like the Euros, I guess one thing that was, I think for me, another reinvigorating thing about the Euros is that people seem to believe in national sports again, whereas I think during the pandemic, a lot of people during the Nations League were starting to question it, say, no, the future of football is club football exclusively. But it seems like the Euros kind of vindicated the virtues of national sports. So I just want to get your thoughts on the state of the game right now. What are the trends? Where does it look like it's going?
Yeah, I mean, look, football has been changing for many years in the UK, and the sort of over commercialization of it and the television rights with Sky and others has brought lots of money into the game that has transformed it. It's transformed stadiums; they're better. Certainly at the higher end level, you know, the grounds have been transformed. But of course, that was in part a response to the Hillsborough disaster and the legislation that said that, you know, everybody must have seating now in the bigger stadiums. But it is changing. I don't think it's changed for the better in some ways. You know, the hype and the commercialization. Ticket prices in the Premier League have gone through the roof, you know, way above inflation. I mean, you know, there's been some great comparisons done about, you know, the equivalent prices of things like, you know, a shirt today that costs, you know, so much less now than in comparison to a Premier League ticket than what they cost comparatively at the start of the Premier League in the 90s. So that's a terrible part that's pricing a lot of people out of the game. But it has to be said, you know, stadiums are so much better. You know, the seating's better, they're safer, you know, the toilets, the facilities. I mean, they are just incomparable to when I was starting going to game in the late 70s and how we were treated in the 1980s. So, you know, there's two sides to that. I don't think it's, you know, it's either one or the other. It's rubbish or, you know, it's all brilliant. It's very, very mixed, as everything always is. I think, you know, this England team and what they've done politically and socially maybe a turning point. It's too early to say, and we all get carried away hoping for the next great turning point, don't we, in politics and analysis and things like that. It's still too early to say, but it's definitely captured the public's imagination. I think the viewing figures were the biggest TV viewing figures since the death of the funeral of Princess Diana. So it really galvanized England, and I suspect Wales and Scotland as well, although obviously many people there may not have wanted England to win. But I've never seen so many black and Asian faces at England football matches ever, when I constantly scan the crowd carefully in the TV. I think that was really telling as well. I've also never seen LGBT banners at England games and many other football games for that matter. The fact that Harry Keane wore an LGBT armband, and of course he's the son of Irish immigrants, is absolutely fantastic. So, that's all changing a lot. Let's see how it happens, and how it materializes afterwards. There's still a minority of racists, bigots, homophobes, sexists in all clubs, including the big ones, including Liverpool. There's, you can't romanticize any team or club, but it's definitely better, safer, and more friendlier, but it still goes on. But I still think it is a hardcore minority, and those people after this competition, I think, will feel less welcome at every football ground in the country, and that undoubtedly is a better thing. Does it mean it will stop? No. Does it mean we have to stop in our campaigning? No. We have to push even harder now, because we should take confidence from the Euros and the debate that's emerged out of it.